The sun was setting over the quiet island, casting long shadows across the sandy beach. The waves gently lapped against the shore, their soft whispers the only sound that could be heard. The protagonist, a man named James, had been living alone on the small island for the past 6 months. His boat had been destroyed in a storm, leaving him stranded. Every day he had to search for food, build shelter, and find ways to stay sane. But today, something felt different. James had gone for his usual walk along the beach, looking for any signs of fish or driftwood that could help him survive. As he walked, he noticed something strange on the horizon. At first, he thought it was a pile of rocks or debris, but as he got closer, he realized it was a person. He froze in place, his heart racing. Was it another survivor? He hadn't seen anyone else on the island since the storm. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the figure, unsure of what he would find. The person was lying on the beach, unmoving. James could see long, tangled hair spread out on the sand, and a slender arm was bent at an odd angle. He could tell right away that this was no ordinary human. The person was unlike anyone James had ever seen before. Her skin was a pale blue, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her features were delicate, with sharp cheekbones and long, elegant fingers. Her clothes, if they could be called that, were made of strange, shimmering fabric that seemed to change colors as the light shifted. It was as if she had fallen from the sky or washed up from another world. James knelt beside her, checking for any signs of life. Her breathing was slow but steady. He wasn't sure what to do. Should he leave her here, or should he try to help? The thought of bringing her back to his shelter crossed his mind, but it seemed risky. After all, she was an unknown. But something inside him told him that he couldn't just leave her there. He had to help. With a deep breath, James carefully lifted her into his arms. She was light, almost weightless, and surprisingly warm. He carried her back to his shelter, a small hut he had built from palm fronds and wood. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do. Inside, he laid her down on a bed made of woven grasses and covered her with a blanket. He looked down at her, unsure of what to do next. Hours passed, and James kept a close watch on her. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary day. Something about the way she looked at him, even in her unconscious state, seemed different, as if she knew something he didn't. But what? Finally, as the moon rose high in the sky, the woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, and she slowly opened her eyes. James took a step back, unsure of what to expect. Her eyes were large and bright, the color of the ocean at dusk. They held a depth of wisdom and curiosity, as though they had seen things, far beyond what he could even imagine. She blinked a few times, her expression filled with confusion. She looked around the room, as if trying to understand where she was. Then her gaze locked on James. For a moment there was a silence, thick with uncertainty. "Where am I?" Her voice was soft, melodic, and strangely calming. It didn't sound quite human, but it was understandable. James hesitated before answering. "You're on a small island," he said, his voice steady. "I found you washed up on the shore. You were unconscious. I brought you here." She looked down at her body as if she was just realizing where she was. Her hands moved to touch her chest and arms, and she seemed to be checking for injuries. I was stranded," she whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. James nodded. "I think so. I don't know how you got here, but you're safe now." The woman's eyes widened as if she had just remembered something important. "My ship," she muttered, her hands shaking as she sat up. "It crashed. I was supposed to... James could see the panic building in her eyes. "Easy. Take it slow," he said gently. "What's your name?" She blinked, as if the question caught her off guard. After a moment, she replied, Zara, Zara, James repeated softly. You're from where, exactly? Zara took a deep breath, her mind racing as she tried to gather her thoughts. I am from a planet far from here. I was on a mission, but something went wrong. I crashed. I thought I thought I was alone. James stared at her, trying to process what she had said. A part of him wanted to believe she was just a lost traveler from a far-off land, but another part of him was unsure. Her appearance, her strange clothes, the way she spoke, none of it made sense. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. He wasn't sure what to think, but one thing was certain. He couldn't let her go. Zara was here and he had to help her. Whatever this strange new chapter of his life meant, he was in it now. As the night stretched on, Zara's breathing grew steadier and she seemed to calm down. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now held a quiet sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." James gave her a small smile, though he wasn't sure what he was getting into. "No problem," he said, his voice quiet. "We'll figure this out together." But deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever imagine. The morning sun rose over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the island. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore echoed softly in the distance. James sat near the entrance of his shelter, watching Zara as she sat on the ground, her legs crossed beneath her. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant, as if she were trying to piece together something from the depths of her mind. James had never been much of a talker, but he knew that he had to learn more about Zara if they were going to figure out how to get her off the island. He also couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of curiosity. Who was she really? Where had she come from, and why was she stranded on Earth? After a while, Zara looked up, meeting James's gaze. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I didn't mean to panic last night." James smiled reassuringly. "It's okay. I understand. You've been through a lot." Zara nodded, her fingers brushing through her long hair. "I've been alone for so long. I thought I'd never see anyone again. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone." She paused, her gaze growing more intense. "But you saved me. I owe you more than you can know." James felt a sense of pride, but also a heavy weight on his shoulders. He didn't feel like a hero. He was just a man trying to survive. But something about Zara's presence made him want to help her, to protect her. There was something special about her, something he couldn't explain. "I don't really know what to do, but I'll try to help you get back to where you belong," James said after a pause. "But you have to tell me more about what happened. What's your ship? Where did you come from?" Zara hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether she should reveal more of her story. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but soft. "My planet is called Illyria," she began. "It's far away, light years beyond your stars. We were an advanced civilization, peaceful and focused on helping others. My mission was to visit other worlds, to share knowledge and build alliances. I was part of a crew on an exploration vessel, a ship called Aurelia. But something went wrong." She paused, her eyes looking down at the sand. "We were being followed. Another group, one that doesn't want peace, was tracking us. They attacked us. We tried to escape, but my ship was too damaged. I crashed here." She looked up at James, her eyes filled with sadness. "I never thought I would survive." James listened intently, trying to absorb the weight of what she was saying. It was hard to believe, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't lying. She was telling him the truth, at least what she knew of it. "So you're from another galaxy?" James asked, still struggling to fully grasp the enormity of what she was saying. Zara nodded. Yes. My people are from Illyria, a planet where the oceans are green and the skies shimmer with two moons. But now, I don't know what's left of my home. If the attackers have found my people, I can't even imagine what they might have done. James felt a pang of sympathy for Zara. Being stranded on this tiny island was bad enough, but she was from a place so far away, and her entire world might be in danger. It was clear that she had lost everything. "I'm sorry," James said quietly. "I can't imagine what that must feel like. But you're not alone here. I'll do everything I can to help you." Zara gave him a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I appreciate that. But I don't know how long we can stay hidden here. The people who attacked us, they don't give up. They'll keep looking for me." James thought for a moment. "What do they want from you?" "They want to use my people's technology," Zara replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "We've developed powerful energy sources and advanced weapons. They want to control that power. They'll stop at nothing to get it." James shuddered at the thought. He had no idea how dangerous these people were, but he could tell that they were far more advanced than anything he had ever known. If they came to Earth, there would be little anyone could do to stop them. "So they're still out there?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara nodded. "Yes. I'm not the only one. There are others out there, more of my people, scattered across the galaxy. But I don't know if they'll be able to help me, and I don't know if I can help them." James stood up, walking over to where Zara sat. "We'll figure it out. Maybe we can get your ship working again, or maybe there's something else we can do." Zara's eyes softened, though she still looked uncertain. "You're very kind, but I don't want to put you in danger. You don't know what these people are capable of. They will stop at nothing to capture me." "I don't care about that," James said, his voice firm. "I want to help you. You saved my life when you washed up on this island, and now it's my turn to return the favor." Zara looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You're brave," she said quietly. "I'm not used to kindness. I've seen so much fear, so much destruction, but here with you it feels different." James smiled. "Maybe. That's because we're both stuck on this island together. We'll make the best of it." Zara looked away, a distant look in her eyes again. "Maybe, but we can't stay here forever. We have to find a way to get me off this planet. If I stay here too long, they'll find me, and when they do, I don't know what will happen." James's heart sank as he realized how serious this situation was. He didn't know how to stop these attackers, but he knew one thing. He had to protect Zara. She was more than just a stranger to him now. She was someone he cared about. "We'll figure it out," James said with determination. "One step at a time." Zara nodded slowly, as if accepting the fact that her future was uncertain. But for the first time since her crash, she allowed herself to feel a small spark of hope. She wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to get back to her people. As the day passed, James and Zara worked together to repair some of the equipment from her ship. The island seemed to hold a strange peace, though both of them knew that peace wouldn't last forever. But for now, they had each other, and that was all they could rely on. The days on the island were long, but James and Zara had settled into a routine. James continued to search for food, while Zara worked on repairing the broken parts of her ship. They made small talk here and there, but it was mostly Zara who shared more about her world, her mission, and the dangers she faced. Every time James looked at her, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. Zara wasn't just some stranded stranger. She was from another planet, with a past so different from his own. He had come to care for her deeply, not just because she was in danger, but because there was something about her that was magnetic. She was strong, but also kind. She had a calmness about her that made him feel at ease, even in the midst of all the uncertainty. One afternoon, as James was gathering firewood by the beach, he heard a sound. It was faint at first, like a low hum in the air. He paused, his heart racing. He looked around, but there was nothing in sight. The feeling of unease began to settle in his chest. When he returned to the shelter, Zara was already waiting for him. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "James," she said urgently, her voice shaking slightly. "We need to talk." James dropped the firewood, sensing the change in her tone. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Zara didn't answer immediately. She paced around the small shelter, clearly troubled. Finally, she stopped and faced him. "I felt something," she said. "Something strange. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like I'm being watched." James frowned, his mind racing. Could it be the attackers? Had they found her already? He stood still, trying to listen for anything unusual. The island seemed calm, as always. But Zara's instincts had proven to be sharp before. "I haven't felt this since the day we crashed," Zara continued, her voice low. "It's them, the ones who attacked us. They're close. I don't know how much time we have." James's heart sank. They had been so focused on making Zara's ship operational again, but he hadn't considered the real danger that was lurking nearby. He hadn't wanted to think about the attackers, about the possibility that they might come looking for Zara. But now, the threat felt more real than ever. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his calm. "What do we do now?" Zara took a deep breath, her face tense. "We can't stay here. We need to find a way to leave the island or at least hide for a while. If they're close, they'll have ships. And if they find me—" She trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. James thought quickly. He knew the island well, but he also knew that hiding wouldn't guarantee safety. If the attackers were as advanced as Zara had described, there was no place on the island that could truly protect them. "Do you think your ship can be repaired in time?" James asked, his voice filled with urgency. Zara hesitated. "I'm not sure. I've managed to fix some of the minor damage, but the engines, they're more complex than anything I've ever worked on. It might take days, maybe weeks, before I can get it working again." James's mind raced. Time wasn't something they had. He couldn't let Zara stay on the island, exposed to the dangers of the attackers. He had to act fast. He paced around the shelter, thinking. "Maybe we can find another way, something else to help us escape." Zara looked up at him, her expression softening. "I know you want to help, but these people, they won't stop until they find me. You have no idea what they're capable of. They're ruthless." James clenched his fists. The fear in Zara's eyes was starting to rub off on him. He could see how much this was weighing on her, how much it had been weighing on her since the crash. She had been alone, facing enemies that could destroy everything she knew. And now, with the hope of returning home, she was faced with even more uncertainty. "I won't let them hurt you," James said, his voice full of determination. "We'll figure this out together. You're not alone anymore." Zara gave him a small, grateful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She had always been alone, traveling through the galaxy, facing danger on her own. Now that she was with someone who cared for her, she found herself torn between gratitude and fear. She didn't want to put James in danger, but at the same time, she knew he was her only chance of survival. For the next few days, the air on the island grew heavier. Both of them kept a watchful eye on the horizon, listening for any signs of movement. But there was no sign of the attackers, at least not yet. Every sound made them both tense. Every breeze carried the weight of uncertainty. James tried to remain, hopeful, but the fear that had settled in his chest never left. One night, as they sat near the fire, Zara looked at him, her face serious. "I never wanted to bring you into this," she said softly. "You should have been safe, living your life. But now, you're in danger because of me." James shook his head. "You didn't bring me into anything. I'm here because I want to be. I want to help you, Zara. I can't just let you face this alone. Not after everything you've been through." Zara looked away, her eyes distant. She had spent so many years alone, fighting to survive. She had never allowed herself to trust anyone fully. But James's words were different. There was no fear in his voice, only a quiet resolve to protect her, to stand by her side. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. James gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We'll get through this. Together." But as the days went by, James could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The sense of being watched grew stronger, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Zara was right. The attackers were close, and soon they would have no choice but to face them. The days that followed were filled with tension. The island, once a place of quiet isolation, now seemed too small, too exposed. James and Zara worked tirelessly to repair her ship. They both knew the attackers weren't far off, and every day that passed brought them closer to danger. Zara had grown more focused, her mind locked on the task at hand, but James could see the fear in her eyes whenever she thought no one was looking. One afternoon, as they were working on the ship's damaged engine, Zara stopped and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Her movements were slower than usual, her face pale. James noticed the change immediately. "You okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Zara nodded, but there was something off in her expression. "I'm fine," she said, though her words lacked conviction. James wasn't convinced. He had come to learn that Zara wasn't one to show weakness. But there was something deeper behind her mask of strength. She had been holding on to something, a truth she hadn't yet shared with him. Something that weighed heavily on her. "Zara," James began, taking a step toward her. "You don't have to keep it all to yourself. If there's something you're not telling me, something that can help us, I need to know." Zara turned away, her gaze fixed on the distant ocean. "I'm not hiding anything from you," she replied. But the words were flat, lacking their usual certainty. James knew better. He had seen enough to recognize when someone was hiding something. He wasn't going to push her, but he could tell that the pressure was building inside her. "It's just that—" Zara's voice trailed off, and she took a deep breath. "I never told you the full story of what happened. Not everything." James was quiet, waiting for her to continue. He had learned a lot about her, the mission, the crash, and the people who were after her. But there were still pieces missing. He could feel that this was a turning point, that Zara was finally ready to open up. "The truth is," Zara began, her voice softer now, "the attack on my ship wasn't just a random attack. It wasn't an accident. We were betrayed." James's brow furrowed. Betrayed. That wasn't something he had expected. He took a step closer, giving her the space she needed to continue. "By someone I trusted," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A member of my crew. Someone who was supposed to protect me. They were working with the enemy the whole time." James felt a chill run down his spine. "How? How could they do that?" Zara closed her eyes, as if trying to block out the memories. They were promised something. Power. Control. They believed that by giving the enemy access to our technology, they would be rewarded. They didn't care about my mission or the safety of my people. James's mind raced. "So your crew member helped the attackers destroy your ship?" Zara nodded slowly. "Yes. They sabotaged the ship during our escape. It wasn't an accident. It was planned. And when the ship crashed, we, my crew and I, were stranded. But the worst part is that I think they still have it. The weapon we were carrying. The thing that could change everything. James felt his heart skip a beat. A weapon? The idea of an advanced weapon in the hands of people like the ones Zara had described was terrifying. You mean they're after a weapon? James asked, his voice low with dread. Zara's eyes met his, filled with pain. Yes, a weapon that can destroy entire worlds. My people have been working on it for years, trying to perfect it. We didn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. But now I fear it's already too late. James felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had known the stakes were high, but hearing it from Zara made it all too real. This wasn't just about escaping the island or getting her back to her people. This was about stopping a force that could annihilate everything. They'll come for me, Zara continued, her voice shaking now. They won't stop. If they find the weapon, it will be the end. For everyone. James's mind raced. He had no idea how to stop the attackers, how to stop this weapon from falling into their hands. But one thing was clear, Zara had been right. The danger was far greater than either of them had imagined. We have to stop them, James said, his voice filled with determination. Zara shook her head. I don't know if we can. Even if we get to the ship, even if I can fix it, there's no guarantee we'll be able to outrun them. They're always watching. James clenched his fists. He hated feeling helpless. But he wasn't going to give up on Zara. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. We have to try, he said, his voice firm. We don't have much time. But we have to stop them before it's too late. We'll figure out a way to fix your ship, and we'll find the weapon before they do. Zara looked at him, her expression a mixture of fear and gratitude. I don't know if we can, but I'll do my best. I'll fix the ship, and together we'll stop them. We have to. James nodded, his resolve growing stronger. They had a plan, or at least the beginnings of one. It wasn't going to be easy, and the odds were stacked against them. But Zara wasn't alone anymore. They would fight together. As they sat together, the weight of the situation still hanging in the air, James felt a new sense of purpose. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop now. The island, the attackers, and the weapon, all of it was connected. But they had a chance to make things right. And for the first time since the crash, James felt a small spark of hope. The days that followed were filled with a sense of urgency. James and Zara worked together as the pressure mounted. They had little time. The attackers were getting closer, and with every passing moment, they could feel the danger lurking just beyond the horizon. The small island that had once seemed like a peaceful escape now felt more like a trap. Zara had made incredible progress on her ship, repairing parts of the engine that had been destroyed in the crash. But there was still so much left to do. James helped wherever he could, gathering materials and doing what he could to support her. He knew it wouldn't be enough. They needed a miracle, and time was running out. One evening, as they sat around, a small fire, James couldn't help but notice the exhaustion in Zara's eyes. She was trying so hard to fix the ship, but he could see that it was taking a toll on her. She hadn't slept much in days, her focus entirely on the task at hand. You need rest, James said, his voice gentle. You're pushing yourself. Too hard. Zara shook her head, her expression serious. I can't afford to rest. We don't have time. I have to finish this. James knew she was right. But the longer they waited, the more dangerous the situation became. He felt helpless, as though no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't outrun the inevitable. Suddenly, a strange sound interrupted their thoughts. It was distant at first, a low rumble that grew louder as it approached. James stood up, his heart racing. His instincts told him that something was wrong. Zara's eyes widened with alarm. They're here, she whispered, her voice full of dread. James's mind raced. He had no idea how the attackers had found them, but it didn't matter. They were here, and there was no way to avoid them. Zara grabbed a tool from the ground, her hands shaking as she prepared to defend herself. "We have to hide," she said, her voice tight with fear. "If they find us, it's over." James nodded. There was no time to argue. He grabbed Zara's arm, pulling her away from the shelter as quickly as he could. The sound of the approaching ships grew louder, filling the air with a sense of impending doom. The ground beneath their feet vibrated as the ships landed on the island, their engines humming with power. Zara looked at James, her expression filled with panic. "I thought I could fix the ship in time, but now we have to face them." James's mind raced, but he didn't have a plan. They were trapped. The island was too small, and there was nowhere to hide. He had no choice but to try and stall them long enough for Zara to finish her work. The sound of footsteps echoed through the jungle. Zara and James crouched low, moving quickly and silently through the thick trees. They had to stay hidden. The ships had landed nearby, and the attackers were already searching for them. Zara's eyes darted around, her senses heightened. "They're close," she whispered. "I can feel them." James held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. They had to stay quiet, stay out of sight. If they were caught, there was no telling what would happen to them. But as they continued to move through the dense foliage, a sudden burst of light lit up the sky. A blast of energy rang out, and the trees around them splintered as something large and powerful passed by overhead. "They're using weapons," Zara said through clenched teeth. "They won't stop until they find us." James's mind raced. They couldn't outrun them. They couldn't hide. But maybe, just maybe, there was one thing they could do. "Zara, we have to make a stand," James said, his voice firm. "We can't just keep running. We'll make our way back to the ship and try to finish the repairs. If we fight back now, maybe we'll have a chance." Zara hesitated, her face a mask of fear and determination. "You don't know what they're capable of. They'll destroy everything if they find us. They're relentless." "I know," James said, his voice steady, "but we have to try. We can't let them take the weapon. We can't let them win." Zara met his gaze, and for a moment, there was a silent understanding between them. They didn't have many options, but together they might just be able to make a difference. "We fight," Zara said finally. "We fight to the end." They made their way back to the wreckage of her ship, where the repairs were almost complete. The enemy was still searching the jungle, but Zara was determined. She had to finish the ship. It was their only chance. James stood guard, keeping an eye on their surroundings. The sound of the attackers' footsteps grew louder, and the tension in the air thickened. They were getting closer. Zara worked quickly, her hands moving with precision as she connected the final parts of the ship. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she focused on the task at hand. James watched her, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. They had to finish before it was too late. Suddenly, Zara's voice broke through the silence. "It's done!" James's eyes widened with relief. The ship was ready. It was time to leave the island. But just as they prepared to board the ship, a voice called out from the trees. "I know you're here." Zara froze, her heart skipping a beat. The voice was familiar. It was the voice of the traitor who had helped the enemy, the one who had betrayed her. "You think you can escape?" The voice called again, mocking. "You're not going anywhere." James and Zara exchanged a look. They were surrounded. The enemy had found them, and the fight for survival was about to begin. The air was thick with tension as Zara and James stood in front of the ship, the sound of footsteps approaching from all directions. The traitor's voice echoed through the trees, sending a chill down James's spine. They had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The enemy was closing in, and the final fight had begun. Zara's hands gripped the tools in her belt, her body tense, ready for anything. James stood beside her, his heart racing, but his mind was focused. There was no turning back now. They had to survive, and they had to stop the enemy before they got their hands on the weapon that could destroy entire worlds. The traitor stepped into view first, his face twisted with a cruel smile. He was tall, with dark eyes that seemed to gleam with malice. His uniform was made of sleek black material that shimmered in the moonlight, marking him as one of the enemy's soldiers. "I knew you wouldn't give up so easily," the traitor sneered. "You really thought you could escape with the weapon, didn't you?" Zara's eyes locked on him, filled with hatred. "You betrayed us," she said, her voice cold but steady. "You're the reason my ship crashed, and now you're going to pay for it." The traitor laughed, stepping closer. "You really think you can stop me? You're weak, just like the rest of your people. You should have known better than to trust me." James clenched his fists, his anger bubbling up. This man had caused so much pain and destruction, and now he was going to take everything from them, but James wasn't about to let that happen. "We'll fight," James said, his voice firm. "You won't get away with this," the traitor scoffed, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He knew they were more dangerous than they seemed. He had seen the way Zara had fought before, and he had seen the determination in James's eyes. Behind him, the sound of more footsteps grew louder. The enemy soldiers were closing in, their weapons ready. Zara and James were surrounded, and the fight was about to get much harder. "Zara, get to the ship," James yelled. "I'll hold them off." Zara hesitated for a moment, her gaze fixed on the traitor. But then she nodded, her resolve hardening. She didn't have time to waste. She had to get the ship ready for takeoff. If they were going to survive, they needed to leave, and they needed to do it fast. With one last glance at James, Zara sprinted toward the ship, her legs pumping as she moved quickly and efficiently. James watched her go, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to buy her time. She couldn't finish the repairs alone, and he couldn't let the enemy stop her. The traitor shouted orders to his soldiers, and they began to move toward Zara's ship. But James wasn't about to let that happen. He stepped forward, facing the enemy soldiers head-on. "I won't let you take her," he said, his voice steady but fierce. The traitor smirked, taking a step closer. "You're outnumbered. You think you can stop us? You're just a man, and she's just an alien. You're both nothing." James's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what we're capable of. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone." The enemy soldiers moved in, but James didn't hesitate. He charged at them, his body moving with a speed and precision that surprised even him. He dodged the first soldier's attack, using his shoulder to knock them aside. He grabbed a weapon from the fallen soldier's belt and swung it at the next attacker, disarming them with a swift motion. The traitor watched, his eyes narrowing. James was stronger than he had expected, more resourceful than he'd given him credit for. But he wasn't going to let some human stop him. Zara was almost at the ship, her hands moving quickly as she worked on the final adjustments. The sound of the ship's engine starting up filled the air, and James's heart lifted. They were going to make it. They just had to hold off the enemy a little longer. As more enemy soldiers approached, James fought harder, using every ounce of strength he had. He dodged, weaved, and struck with precision, taking down one soldier after another. But he was starting to tire. There were too many of them, and they were well trained. He couldn't keep this up forever. He turned just in time to see the traitor charging toward him, a weapon drawn. James barely had time to react. The traitor swung the weapon at him, aiming for his chest. James twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. But he didn't have much room left to maneuver. The traitor sneered, raising the weapon again. But before he could strike, a bright light flashed from behind him. The ship's engines roared to life, and Zara's voice rang out across the island. "James, get in the ship! Now!" James's heart skipped a beat. The ship was ready. They could leave. He didn't have much time. With one final glance at the traitor, James turned and sprinted toward the ship, his legs burning with effort. The traitor yelled in fury, but it was too late. James jumped into the ship, the door slamming shut behind him. The ship lifted off the ground, its engines roaring as it ascended into the sky. James glanced out of the window, watching as the island grew smaller and smaller beneath them. The traitor and his soldiers were left behind, powerless to stop them now. Zara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," she said softly. "We're free." James smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. They had made it. They had survived. And now the stars were waiting for them. As the ship flew further into space, Zara turned to James. "Thank you. For everything." James nodded, his gaze turning toward the distant stars. "We're not done yet," he said quietly. "There's still work to do. We have to stop them. For good." Zara's eyes shone with determination. "We will. Together." And, as they soared into the unknown, James knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but with Zara by his side, he felt ready for anything.